here with Gary Fisher. We're really, really thrilled to be in the presence of a genuine living legend. And we've just been sat here for about half an hour just chatting about Brexit, about Trump, about communism, the Vietnam War, the Grateful Dead. We haven't even talked about bikes yet. We'll get there. Basically, the last time we spoke to Gary on the podcast, I think my friend Scott from Velocast said, here's an example of a life well lived. So we're going to open everything up, okay? You can ask any questions, whatever you want, okay? But first of all, let's look at repack, but everyone speaks about repack. I really want you guys to know about the repack scene, and you've all heard the podcast with Charlie Kelly, but I want to speak to Gary about the future of mountain biking. Everyone speaks to Gary about 1979, and I want to know 20 years time, okay? Because Gary's still working for Trek. He's all over the world. He's here with Trek at the moment.
That's why they keep me around.
Yeah.
Because I talk about what's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, basically, should we kick off? Do one of you guys want to ask Gary a question to start?
Not yet, no.
Yeah, you must ask.
No. It's a Sunday, and you get to meet God. So
I'm just some guy. I'm just some
So Bianca, you're working in a bike shop in Cork in Ireland, is that right?
Yeah, I'm working in Halfords now. I worked in another workshop before, a shop and workshop, and yeah, I'm a bit new in this. I'm only a bit over 1 year old in the industry, so.
Brilliant. And are you in Cork City or out in the country?
I'm in Cork, yeah, I live in Cork.
Cool, brilliant. Reg, you must have some questions for Gary Fisher.
I hadn't even thought about it. I thought there'd be hundreds of people here.
Yeah, they may well be joining us shortly.
I think I met Gary long time ago, down at a show in London, possibly. Can't remember where, but things have moved on. Bikes are changing all the time. As you said, where does he think the industry's going? I mean, materials on the frame, is everything's going to be full suspension? And you've got electric bikes, but there's no electric bikes with the rigid forks. They've all got suspension forks, for touring. It's like going into electric cars, and the UK is trying to get to electric cars, but you've got to have charging points. There's going to be too many. You're going to start looking at having to have fast chargers, or maybe carrying extra batteries. There's loads of different things that's in the future there, but
But at the present is the fact with electric cars that you're going to have an electric car by 2032.
Yeah.
No petrol cars or diesel cars anymore, and that's a big stretch. And people are going to have to, the companies are going to have to really up their game to make it work.
Yeah. I just don't think that's going to happen. But where's the electric bike scene? Everything's going to have to get smaller and more powerful to get it. I like touring, but I haven't been cycling because I've got osteoarthritis, and I can only cycle so far.
Yep.
So an electric bike, my wife's been at me to assist me, but I'm saying, well, they're too heavy. And they've all got suspension forks, which I don't need. There's nothing really on the market. Specialized make one. I mean, I'm a Specialized dealer, but the design of it is no use to carry any weight, on the carrier.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to have to sort of try and design a bike myself, sort of thing.
But
That's not bad.
You want an electric cargo bike? And come on, you can get those. There are people making those. But we don't make one right now. Specialized doesn't make one. It's most of the Germans making them, and there's a company called Yuba that makes a lot of them. That works really well. I love those. I love the cargo bikes.
No, me too.
Yeah, the new Kona electric Kona Utes.
Right, the Ute.
Yeah,
There's a few of them.
I used to have one of those as my London bike, the Kona Ute, you know, and it's a good
Right.
bike just to throw things in and ride around because it rides quite nice. And those long, I think an electric longtail, you know, with some nice brakes would be perfect, some nice rigid forks. And
Yeah, well, it's good. You got kids.
yeah,
It's good to put them in the front
yeah,
because you can watch them, you can talk to them, and when they throw something out, you can go circle back and get it.
yeah.
You can see them do it. So,
Yeah. Maybe I've not looked around enough, but you know, I'm looking at long distance touring.
oh yeah, yeah. Well, we do that with we have Trek Travel, and it's all these you know, tours. I mean, vacations, you know, in exotic places, and it'll be families. And sometimes there's somebody in the family that says, "Hey, I don't want to climb these hills, and I'm not very fast." And we get them on the electric bike, and it makes everything good. That works pretty well. But you're talking about self-supported, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's coming. All that stuff is coming, and then this next couple of years, you're going to see a lot of electric road bikes. A lot of people are getting into that like crazy. Those are actually pretty light, you know, and they don't have a lot of capacity, and it won't be, they're only like 200 watts, something like that. But you get a bike that's, you know, when the battery goes out, you can still ride it. It still feels pretty light.
Light, yeah.
So there's more engineers in the bike industry working on electric bikes than any other category right now, because everybody in the business is making a lot of money from electric bikes, so they're putting a lot of resource in it because they want to stay at the head of the game. So you're going to see a lot of variation, and you'll see more here. You can already get quite a few different electric bikes in Germany and in Europe and everything, but the UK has been a little bit behind, the US has been a little bit behind, but it's all of a sudden starting to catch fire. You know, our sales in the UK of electric bikes are really good this year. Last year they weren't very good. It's coming up.
Yeah.
So looking back then to, if we look at the clunkers days, in the very early days, you were a road racer.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
and that's a funny thing. The repack, you mentioned that.
Mm.
I was a road racer. I was a first category road racer for about 10 years. And in the town I lived in Fairfax, you know, with Charlie and everything. Man, I mean, nobody knew I rode the road bike there. You know, really. The repack, oh, it was you know, I'd walk down the street in Fairfax and people would come out of the bar and say, "Gary, you got to win that race next week, you know, for Fairfax pride," and sort of thing like that. It was really funny. It really caught hold of people's imagination because the notion of riding on the dirt on a bicycle was insane at that moment. You know, it was really, I mean, you tell somebody, you'd see somebody, you'd be out there in the woods riding a bike, and it was like half would say, "You can't do that. That's impossible."
Yeah.
You know, and just from the point of like, that's ridiculous. And the other half would say, "That's cool. I want one." And that was perfect, you know?
Yeah. I can't remember rightly, you either still hold the course record from that or had the most victories. Which one was it?
No. Joe had the most victories because I was gone being a road racer a lot of the time. Half the time I wasn't there in town. You know, I was out on the road, you know, doing a road race somewhere. But I hold the all-time record at this moment. But I'll tell you honestly, a friend of mine, Joe Lall, that's the son of Mert Lall, a famous motorcycle racer that's the star of Bruce Brown's film On Any Sunday. Okay, and Mert's a great guy. Mert helped us with suspension in 1991. We made a bike together. I went to Japan 7 times with Mert. You know? Anyway, his son, Joe, has ridden down that course and beaten my record. I know he has. And I trust him, you know, and he's recorded it on Strava. So he wants to put together an underground race again and go out and smash the records. And as they should be. You know, I mean, these guys are incredible these days. I mean, we got some incredible athletes, incredible bikes, you know, the whole thing. And the course is funny, though. It's more like, it's not gnarly at all. You know, it's fast. And I did well in it because I had a really good turn of speed, you know, and I was a good bike handler. But the guys today, I mean, what they do is like whole another world from what we were doing back then. So that record should be broken.
Well, I wonder, would they have to ride it on clunkers though, or on a breezer number one?
No, and the breezer number one, it wasn't a good bike for that. Simply, well, okay, it was in the very beginning. The first year he made it, the first 2 years he made the bike, it all had steel rims. Okay. And these rims were these Schwinn S2 rims, double walled steel rims, chrome plated. They weighed 55 ounces each. And then came the alloy rim from Ukai and Araya. And they came to us from the BMX guys in Southern California. The BMX guys in Southern California saw what we're doing and said, you guys are cool. And they helped us out a lot. And well, they developed that rim for what they call the cruiser class in BMX. That rim weighed 19 ounces. Okay.
Yeah.
And then we had these tires back in the day called the Uniroyal Knobby. And it was this big, heavy knobby tire that you could buy for $11.95 at any bike shop in the U.S. And you could run the pressure down to about 20 pounds, 20 PSI, and not have a puncture with that tire and those rims. Because the rims, the edges of the rims were rounded, and rather wide because it was a double wall rim. You look at all the modern rims, and the edges are 1.5 millimeter to 2 millimeters wide. And then sometimes we'll machine the outer circumference of that edge just to make it so you could fit on a tubeless tire and get it on, well and everything, which creates a cutting edge. And you get rim pinches, right? And you get, snake bites. And so you're obliged to run your pressure, the modern bikes came out, the newer bikes, we brought out, and in the 80s, and they were much lighter, but boy, they didn't go down a hill like the old bikes. They really, and rigid and everything. So it was sort of funny. I mean, the old bike, my old clunker, it rode really well downhill. Didn't climb for beams. I mean, my original bike that I raced the repack on, which was an old Schwinn Excelsior X. A Schwinn Excelsior X frame was a good frame, actually. We did a bunch of frontal impact tests on frames, and I tested one of those frames. It was 1,100 pounds it took to crush the front end. And we had a standard, our first mountain bikes made out of road bike tubing almost, they were actually a little bigger though. I mean, traditional road bike, 1.125" down tube, 1-inch top tube. And we went to 1.25" down tube and 1.125" top tube. That still didn't produce a frame that was strong enough. Those frames, the earliest frames, they were like 0.35 wall, and straight gauge, and those would die. And it took 650 pounds to crush that frame. A road frame was more like about 595, something like that, regular road frame. And we figured out you needed about 850 pounds to make the bike survive, because past 850 pounds, it would shuck the rider right off. You couldn't hang on,
Yeah.
So it had to be that strong. So the old Schwinn Excelsior frame was 1,100 pounds. It was amazing, and it weighed 7.5 pounds of the frame. And Joe's first frames weighed more than an Excelsior because he used the twin laterals on them and a lot of brass.
Yeah.
A lot. He wanted to make sure, and a lot of heavy tubing, wanted to make sure these things lasted forever. So those bikes that he made, the first 10 bikes, they'll probably be around for, the next few hundred years, a long time. But that old bike worked really well. And then it had really good brakes. The first bikes that Joe made used cantilevers on steel rims. And well, California's pretty dry. In the dry weather, that works. In the wet weather, forget about it. You got to wait. The rim's got to go around a number of times, squeegee off the water, and it starts to work. And if you go through high weeds that are all wet and everything, the rim never gets dry, and then you're ruined. So that was. I used the drum brakes from Tandems, and the drum brake, it had to be that. You use a drum brake from a single, it would overheat, and you were done. And the drum brakes from the single bike used a 10 millimeter solid axle, which would break. And it would break. You would think, oh, it's going to break on the downhill. No, it would break on the uphill because we're using really long cranks, really low gears. You point this thing up this hill, and the chain would put so much pressure on it, it would break the axle. So I had to go out. You know, Charlie was a roadie for the Sons of Champlain, and so he'd go out on a road, and every little town he'd go to, he'd find the old bike shops, and he could look for old Schwinn frames and for drum brakes. And it was especially the drum brakes, Union drum brakes, the German drum brake from a Schwinn twin tandem, which there were quite, or a Town and Country. Those were the two models that had this old, and that's the way it was. You know, the first, I put my first bike clunker, you know, together in September of '74. And, you know, for the next years, I was like trying to be an Olympic cyclist, right? A top road racer. And I was at the Olympic Training Center in '79, wanted to go to Moscow in '80. And our president, Jimmy Carter, said, well, we're going to boycott this thing. We're not going to Moscow. And at that moment, I said to myself, time to start the company, start making bikes. You know, because I knew this thing was going to be big and crazy, because it was way too much fun.
You came up with a bit of a catchy name for that company.
Oh yeah, mountain bikes. You know, and we used a lousy trademark attorney, and we never really managed to trademark it, and it became generic. You know, but the company's name was Mountain Bikes. You know, and I started that with Charlie, and that was funny. We did that in September of '79, and we started with $600. You know, we would ask for a $500 deposit on a bike, and then with UPS, you get a COD delivery. Then you had 10 days to make the check good. You know, the check wouldn't get cashed. 10 days. We never bounced the check, and it was amazing. Our bikes were $1,320 the first year. And we say to people, well, you don't want a cheap parachute, do you? And they were beautiful, you know, and it was something in that, well, at that time, in 1980, you could buy a full camp bag Colnago for $450. You could buy a Ben Sirota, full Kemp in yellow, custom frame, beautiful blue Mavic rims for $995, and our bike was $1,320. We sold 160 the first year, and just under 1,000 the second year. And I got introduced, this guy Bill Fields, who was the ad sales guy for Bicycling Magazine, introduced me to Antonio Colombo at the New York Bike Show, and he introduced me as, well, this guy sells more bikes over $1,000 than anybody in the United States. And I was sort of shocked. He goes, I do? Wow, I guess I do. You know, it was funny. But we had a really nice shop. I mean, it was the coffee, Gary. Oh, I'm fine. I'm already blabbing really hard. Yeah. And we had a really nice shop. You know, designed it. I had my friend Craig Mitchell make all the custom fixtures for the place. It was carpeted. I would wear a suit and tie. I was the only person in the whole, you know, nation in a bike shop. Well, there was a guy in New York that would do it, wear a suit and tie. And I got a really good clientele. It really, really worked. So anyway, we got our first loan from, we didn't have any money. So I got our first loan from John Finley Scott. And he was a UC Davis professor. And he actually helped us write the catalog. He had a word processor in 1979. And we went up to his place about 75 miles away, and we banged out the first catalog. And John Finley Scott was great. He put on the Davis Double Century. And I had won it one year and everything, met him there, and he was a character around the scene. And he made what's called a woodsy bike. He called a woodsy bike in 1953, okay? And this was an old Schwinn frame, a more modern Schwinn frame, that the rear end had been widened out. There was a fork on it, and the rear had a Sturmey Archer 3-speed and drum brake combined, and then there was a 3-speed cog on it. And then a regular caliper brake on the front, old school. And he made one bike, right? And, you know, I mean, because what we did wasn't absolutely original. You know, I mean, come on. People that rode bikes 120 years ago, they rode off-road. There were no paved roads, right? So, I mean, it wasn't like a brand new thing, but it was a brand new thing, and that we'd go crazy and go fast down hills and have fun. And that was the amazing thing. I had ridden cyclocross. The first cross race I'd ever ridden, I was 14 years old, 1965. 1975, I rode the first national championships on the cross. It was the first cross championships we had in the States. So I knew, and I had, you know, and I wrote for Bicycling Magazine starting in 1977. I was a road tester. And one of the bikes I tested was a Mundia proper cyclocross bike that, you know, like that year, Albert Zweifel, a Swiss guy, won the worlds on that bike. And I kept it. That was a cool bike. That bike had gears. That bike had cantilever brakes. It also had alloy rims and tubulars and everything. And that bike was really cool, but you go out and ride it for 2 or 3 hours, and you come back and patch tires for 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
You were carrying a number of tires over your shoulders because in the woods in California, there's a fair amount of rocks. And you start flying down some big hill, you hit 30 miles an hour, and you start killing your tires, you know? So that was no good. And I had some friends in high school in Larkspur, California. I went to Redwood High. And when I was 15 years old, the Larkspur Canyon gang, I got in with those guys. And they were like hippies, right? And they like they do drum circles. Oh man. And they did the thing. They knew I was a bike racer, and they said, you got to check out what we do. And I went out with them, and I said, man, this is fun. But these bikes are primitive. I mean, you know, we would go out with 6 people, and at the end of the ride, 3 of them would be dragging their bikes back. And they couldn't even ride them. And so they weren't very robust. They had no gears. So we would spend 80% of the time pushing the bikes uphill. And I said, this is stupid. Let's put gears on it. Well, I didn't do anything for a long time, not till 74. You know, finally, you know, I met Charlie. But things happened between that. And 68, I rode this bike race. Or no, it wasn't 68. It was like 66. I rode a bike race called the Tour Del Mar. I was a junior. I was like 15 years old, and a band played there. 2 bands, the Grateful Dead and the Quicksilver Messenger Service. And I'll tell you, it was 3 nights they played. Less than 100 people showed up because they weren't popular, right? It was all brand new. But I'd gone to the Trips Festival at Longshoremen's Hall. I was a big follower of this, and I thought these guys were really cool. And at the same time, you know, after I went to that concert, I met these guys. I mean, Jerry Garcia teaches me how to roll a J. I'm 15 years old. And Walter Gimber, who was he ran the Federation. He was a representative in Northern California. He came to me and said, 2 weeks later, he said, Gary, your hair is too long. She's just over my ears, you know. You can't race. Okay. So I ran away from home, and I went to the Haight-Ashbury, and I lived with the Grateful Dead. And it was a lot of fun. I met a lot of crazy people. I mean, a lot of good people. I mean, Jack Leary, Timothy Leary's son. We're the same age. He was my best friend. You know, Ken Kesey used to go up on his farm all the time. You know, the writer, Ken Kesey. And, you know, Owsley, the bear, the guy who made more LSD than anybody on the planet. I used to work for him too. So with the Dead, we had a company called Grand Ultimate Steward Company, Steward Service, otherwise known as GUS. And we worked for the Dead, and we worked for the Airplane. And I decorated the Jefferson Airplane's mansion at one point, and I did I used to do light shows, which we had 10 people on our show. We had like, oh man, it was something. We had eight 35 millimeter projectors. We had 4 big overhead projectors. We had 4 16 millimeter film projectors, and everything was highly modified. And my partner in that, a guy named Alan Cooper, he later became what they call the father of Visual Basic. And then he has a company called Cooper.com, where they do web design for big companies like Sony and IBM and stuff like that. And it's sort of funny. I mean, I still stay in contact with Alan. He's not a bike guy at all, but he's a really cool guy. I really like him. And, you know, we wound up working for the big companies and the establishment and everything. We started out, you know, in a completely different world and everything. But okay, Grateful Dead, all that. It like everything went to hell after a while. You know, drugs came into the scene. There was a guy from New York that shows up one day at the house, and he's got the big tin of cocaine, and he says, "It's organic, and it's not addictive." And people believed him. And that stuff is really bad, you know. And there was that, and that came into the scene and everything. And then came this thing called Altamont. And Altamont, you know, here was, you know, I was the first organizing meeting of that event. And here's, you know, Ron Racco from the Grateful Dead, Bill Thompson from the Airplane, Sonny Barger, the Hells Angels, and what's his name? Sam Cutler from the Rolling Stones, you know, all in this meeting. And we're going to use the Angels as security because we always did.
Yeah.
We were very trustworthy, you know, and the problem we had was there were drugs backstage. If we used normal security, shit, man, the cops could show up and bust everybody, you know? So we used the Angels, and the Angels were fine. And actually at Altamont, they did a good job. I mean, because this guy, Meredith Hunter, gets up on stage, he's going to kill Mick Jagger. He's got, you know, he's got a gun. And his girlfriend is totally in love with Mick Jagger, and he's there to kill Mick Jagger. And the stage is only 4 feet high. Anybody can jump up on the stage. It was nuts, you know? And the Angels took the gun, put him down, you know, and the whole thing. They did a good job, but it was a mess. I mean, they used a pool cue and everything. It was a mess. 4 people died that day, right?
Oh my God.
And the dream was over, you know? It was over. Everybody left town. Everybody left San Francisco. It was incredible, you know? And we moved to Marin County, and I started living with a band that was an offshoot of the Dead, which was New Riders of the Purple Sage. It was a psychedelic country western band. And I started riding my bike again. You know, it's like, shit, this is the only thing. This is the best. I got to ride my bike. I got to ride my bike. And then somebody tells me, hey, there's a guy just like you in the scene. He's got long blonde hair, and he rides an orange bike. And I had an orange Colnago, and I meet this guy, Charlie Kelly. And he's got an orange Colnago too. And he says to me, hey, I need a roommate. And I said, done, let's go. Because the New Riders were becoming a popular band. And what happens when you move out of the commune and you get your own house? So
Yeah.
it was heaven. You know, I moved in with Charlie. It was great, you know, and we, you know, and I brought along this old clunker that I'd had since high school. And he says, what the hell is that? And I said, well, you got to come out with me. We got to go do this. So you know, it was really funny. I got one other bike, but then Charlie's friend, Fred Wolf, wanted to come along. So it's hilarious. We go out on our first ride, and we got 3 guys and 2 bikes. We take turns riding the bikes, and the third guy runs. That's how tough we all were, you know? We did like about a 20-mile ride, you know? And then we were like having to run and then get on a bike and ride. And there are all these single-speed, you know, coaster brake bikes, which are a joke in a way. And then a few weeks later, I said, well, shit, I would have put together a bike with gears on it, you know, and really powerful brakes. It took me about a month to figure it out. It's not rocket science, you know, really. You know, they talk about it as an invention. Well, the actual piece, sort of, but not really. It's not there wasn't a lot of technology that went into it at the time. It was like a oversized road bike in a lot of ways with fat tires, you know, and a real wide gear range and cantilever brakes. That was about it, you know. The thing that made the craze, you know, it's like you got to have a good design. You got to hype the living shit out of it. And then you got to deliver. And in this part here, my grandfather, he worked in Hollywood. He was the editor of the Beverly Hills High School newspaper. He got a job out of high school working for Hal B. Wallace. That's the seminal Hollywood publicist. And at that moment, they were going from silent movies to talkies. And my grandfather's first big job was to teach the actors how to speak. And they could not speak the King's English. And it had to be an English that everyone in the United States could hear, understand, and respect. So he created what we call today American Broadcast English, the sort of dry, English, you know? And he then created a job called the script director, and he moved to Warner Brothers. He was with Warner Brothers for 40 years, and he did a lot of big films. He did like Three Musketeers. He did Robin Hood. He did Captain Blood. He did Stanley Lee Kubrick's Lolita, you know, and he used to drag over Errol Flynn, Joan Crawford, and Ronald Reagan to our house all the time because my grandfather was real big into the Screen Actors Guild. He taught me how to speak, how to stand in front of the camera, how to speak to the camera. And my mother, you know, in publicity, my mother taught me publicity. And she used to say to me all the time, you know, about the magazines and the newspapers and, you know, the TV, the press in general. I was like, Gary, you're doing their job for them. And that meant you were getting them stories and content. And indeed, it's like one time, you know, I was a small boy in Beverly Hills. We lived there. And we used to go to a park in Hollywood that a lot of the actors' kids would go to. And it was sort of a rat hole. And Walt Disney would show up with his family and pontificate to everybody about how he was going to build a park for the family. And he did. And we went to opening day. That was a crazy thing. Anyway, the opening day, that's a whole nother story. But the next day, my friend around the corner and I, my friend Arthur Robbins and I, we put together a Disneyland in his backyard. My mother calls up somebody in the LA Times and says, hey, I got a story for you. They come over and do a story. I'm in the LA Times. I'm 4.5. That was my first piece of publicity. And I got very, very, very good at it, you know. And in 1980, 81, 82, man, we were in so many national magazines, newspapers, TV, because, I mean, man, I'd just go down to the magazine rack. I had an ABC chart, you know, ABC, the ratings of what the circulations are of all these magazines. And you go look for a real thick magazine with a good ad ratio. You buy the magazine, you go to the masthead, and you just start calling these people and say, I got a story for you. I got a story for you. I got a story for you. And they are in need of stories each and every day. You must have excellent photography and you must have excellent writing or it gets thrown out, you know? But that's how it works, you know, and it's still, today, I mean, it's not print, it's you know, stuff on the internet and, you know, some TV stuff, you know, like that. But, okay, so you got to hype the living shit out of it. And then the third part, deliver the product, you know, and my competitors, you know, they were not doing a good job of that, you know, and they do like my good friend Joe Breeze. He's meticulous. He took it'd take him a year to do 10 bikes, you know, and it's like, forget about it, you know. You got to make people happy and tell them what this thing is. So this was another, you know, Charlie and I did a presentation. I was working for Bicycling Magazine and they asked to do a presentation on the mountain bike at the New York Bike Show. And man, we had been practicing this stuff because the slides were being taken by Wendy and Larry Craig. Larry Craig is Neil Young's steel guitarist, still is. Anyway, Wendy and Larry got a divorce. Wendy wound up with all the photos, whatever. But we had this incredible, you know, collection of photos. And they were from, you know, Repack, Sierra Nevadas in California, and Crested Butte, Colorado. I mean, just some amazing photos. And we used to practice this all the time. And here's a funny thing. Charlie doesn't tell you about this, but the sound guy that he worked with, Howie Hammerman, that was George Lucas's third employee. So we used to have the run of George Lucas's screening room at his house. It was funny, you know, and we practiced this and we killed him at the New York Bike Show. And who showed up to see it? But all the bigwigs from Japan, you know, all the industry people, and a few from Europe and a few from the States. And it was the Japanese that fascinated me most. And they started showing up at our shop in droves. And I said, okay. Went down to Chinatown in San Francisco, bought that round trip ticket to Japan, and I said, here, let's make stuff. I'm going to tell you, you know, and I worked with all the companies, not just Shimano. I mean, Shimano, yes, the Suntour side, Sugino, Ishiwata, Tange, Nikto, Diacompe, Takagi, Panaracer, Panasonic. Panasonic made my first bikes. And I would say, look, I don't have that much money, but what I want, I'm going to give you all my information. And I want first delivery, best price, and I need terms. The first big loan we got was from the Japanese government. Can you imagine that? Because these guys got together and said, hey, we got to take care of this guy, and everything. It was amazing. So, I mean, that's how we got the volume up, and got it going right away. It was nuts. I mean, it was fabulous, But I was bound to determine this is going to work, I was bound to determine this is going to work.
So the Crested Butte, for anyone that doesn't know the history, I believe it's the first time you heard of people riding clunkers of off-road bikes outside California. Is that right?
Well, it's a funny thing. Okay, any of you guys familiar with the Whole Earth catalog? That came out in 1968. It had a photo of the Earth taken by Stuart Brand. And we had the 50th year anniversary this last weekend, weekend before last. And I went to it because I wrote for it. And that was after they did a story on us, on the clunker scene. They did another magazine called Coalition Quarterly. They did a story on us guys, what we were doing in the clunker scene, because mountain bikes wasn't around yet. And they had a sidebar, and they talked about Crested Butte, Colorado. And we were fascinated. So Charlie calls him up, and the phone number is the Grub Steak Saloon. It's a bar. And, well, it turns out they had done this Pearl Pass tour, which was like, and the Pearl Pass tour originated when these guys on motorcycles came from Aspen, Colorado, over Pearl Pass to Crested Butte. And Crested Butte was a town of working people, miners, forest fighters. These guys are tough. I mean, and hippies, and it wasn't a mainstream place like Aspen. It wasn't a high-end rich place like Aspen. So these guys on their motorcycles come over Pearl Pass and park in front of the, Grub Steak Saloon, go inside and make asses of themselves. And the guys from Crested Butte decide, well, to hell with these guys. We're going to go to their bar next week on our town bikes. And so they do, and that was the first Pearl Pass tour. Then the next year they didn't have one. And then we called them up and said, are you going to do it? Can we come? And they said, the guy looking around, hey, these guys from California want to come out and ride with us. What do you guys say? Yeah, hell yeah, have them come out. So we did. And the scene there was like, man, it was like cruiser bikes, single speed coaster brake bikes, no front brake with ape hangers. That's what these guys rode. And their training was, we get out on a ride within 10 miles, get back on the bike, keep going. They're tough, really tough. We had a great time, and the next year, they went crazy. They took it on. They took the whole full thing on. They found the best bikes, opened up a bike shop in town, and it was paradise. And for about 7 or 8 years, every year the Crested Butte to Aspen ride was the ride that everybody in the industry had to come out to. I mean, the Japanese would come, everybody come and everything. But it got sort of eclipsed by Moab, which is sort of funny. And then because it had a problem. It was a camp out overnight at over 10,000 feet out in the middle of nowhere. And that environment doesn't support, more than 50 riders, 50 campers. So they limited it to that, and the whole thing went away after a few years. It was funny. But Charlie went back there this year and rode it, and they did it again, and it was really funny. Joe Breeze's son, oh my God, he did it on an old bike with just a coaster brake. And he told me that was one of the scariest things he's ever done in his life. Because those old clunkers, when you go with just a rear brake like that, first off, you got a coaster brake, and if you just feather it, it gets hot, and it overheats. Then you get a trail of smoke coming out the back as the grease evaporates. So you're on, off, on, off, on, off. And with no front brake, you got to turn the thing sideways to slow down. You're a goner. So the clunker guys are heroes in a lot of ways.
And is it right in Crested Butte there was a lot of cross-country skiers and they saw the mountain bike and they went, we can do that in the summer?
Yeah, well, there was skiing and cross-country skiing, but no, it wasn't that this is something to do when I can't ski. It was more like, this is the shit.
Yeah.
I loved it,
Yeah.
and it's paradise. If you can handle the altitude. And I was fit. I was a racer. I had no problem with the altitude. I mean, it's beautiful. There's a ton of trails. It's beautiful. And the athletes there have good attitude. They aren't like idiots, There's none of this stuff. It's all like, let's go ride. Let's ride hard. Let's have fun. It's a great place. I love going there still. I haven't been in 10 years, so I'll go back.
One of the things that I noticed reading Charlie Kelly's amazing book, Fat Tire Flyer, which Charlie's on a lecture tour at the moment in the UK, guys, so look out for dates. I'm going to be meeting up with him next Monday for a similar chat. But if you look at Charlie's book and the evolution of the mountain bike, the bikes we call retro bikes, from the sort of mid-90s, they were super advanced compared to what you guys were riding on. And
well, it's like this. You gotta realize the 60s and 70s, the bike was the same all the time. I mean, you'd get a camp bag group, and how you told what year it was made is you look at the back of the rear derailleur, it had a number stamped on it. Otherwise, they were the same from year to year to year to year. I mean, it's like a baseball mitt shall be 12 inches long, and it was like bikes had that sort of regulation on it. I mean, they were so the same, and the same material, and everything. And it's just, everything's changed since then. I mean, we've gotten, the mountain bike came along, the triathletes came along, Francisco Moser and his crazy hour record bikes, Greg LeMond and the aero bars and that sort of thing. And it just sort of blew the lid off everything, because it was like, this old stuff is sort of dull, and the new stuff is really cool. And it really changed things. And then people got into the industry from the motorcycle side and from the technology side and from, rocket science. I mean, at Trek, we've got like 8 guys that used to work for NASA. They like to do bikes more, but I mean, it's become, bikes today are made in the same way of something from NASA or something you get from a Formula One, And what kind of an object can you buy made in this way? You can buy a bike, you can actually ride it, and you can feel the difference. They're amazing, And that's a big thing I go through with a lot of my young charges and my dealers. I'll say, look, people got a lot of money these days. And you think that's a lot of money? I mean, $10,000, $15,000 on a bike, that's chump change to a lot of these guys. They go out and spend that a week, 2 weeks on vacation and bring back nothing but a few photos, And you give them a bike, I mean, that's something. So don't hesitate when the guy wants to buy the $500 set of pulleys, Just say, yes, you're going to be happy. We deserve a piece of the action in the bike world. I mean, bike people tend to be frugal. We love to be efficient, and we forget. People are crazy, and there's more people with more money than ever in history, and their special only goes up very gradually. So there's relatively more money going after less special, and people are willing to pay more for it. Create a special experience. Treat people right, the way they want to be treated, and the doors open up.
Yeah.
Well, that brings me really nicely actually onto what I wanted to talk about next, Gary, which is your work with Trek. Because for myself, with Cycle Systems, we've been Trek dealers, Giant dealers, Specialized dealers, loads of the other companies in between. And I'm not just saying this, the Trek looked after us the best.
Right.
As a dealer, Trek looked after us the best. It meant we could look after our customers the very best, And I remember seeing some video of you when you started working with Trek to say it felt like a real natural connection between yourselves. So tell us about how Gary Fisher Mountain Bikes started working with Trek, and you still work for them now. So
1977, I was writing for Bicycling Magazine. I visited Trek, and I did a story on them called "A Giant is Growing in the Midwest." I just really liked the president, Dick Burke, and his son, John, and I liked their philosophy. And they want to do high quality things. And really, I mean, Trek is the company that has good relations with their dealers and everything. We treat people like we like to be treated. Okay. Specialized, better marketing. We're cool. We're so cool. I don't know if you're good enough to be with us. Sometimes I get to that place. Giant, they are the world's best buyers of parts. They pay less than anybody else, and they get better delivery. You know, I got to say, and they get a beautiful factory. You know, one in Taiwan that's beautiful, one in China that's beautiful. I mean, they helped Shimano put together their factory in China. You know, got them the land, got them the employees. I know they get a better price than Shimano, and nobody else does. You know that? Now, that said, at this moment, Mike Senior, who's my friend, you know, the president of Specialist. I've known him forever. Oh my God. I've known his wife forever too. Those two are getting a divorce. And Mike is not happy. Oh my God. You wonder why it's been sort of quiet out of Specialized?
Yeah.
Mike's got other things on his mind at this moment.
Big changes there.
Oh, shoot. You know, I feel, you know, I don't like to beat my competitors this way, but, you know, this is, and plus I've been with Mike, you know, Mike, I've been saying the last 15 years, will you get off of us and play fair and be a nice guy? You know, come on. We have a common interest, you know, get more people on bikes and everything. So he's growing up and not been such so aggressive with that. You know, he used to hire people away and do all sorts of crazy stuff. Yeah, come on, Mike. That's so. And then Giant, Tony Lowe and King Lou, you know, who run the show, about 3 years ago, they turned the company over to their kids. And what's their biggest asset? The factory. That's what they're working on. And we're working on retail at Trek. And we're working with our dealers like we have for such a long time. You know, we have this whole thing called CI events, continuous improvements, and we come into their shops. And we've been doing this for 15 years. And when we first started to do it, the guys would say, look, that's the line. You stay on that side, I'll stay on this side. I know my business. I know retail. Reality is, we're the bank of Trek, right? And to loan, you know, send you bikes and everything, we look at all your financial statements. We look at everything, you know? And so through that, we've seen who does well, who does poorly. We've learned a lot about the business, a lot. So at first they were this way, push us off. And then we come in and say, you know, next year we say, well, look, we took your friend down the street here. We took him from here to there. And this guy over here, we took him from here to there. And this guy over there, we took him from here to there. And I go, wait, what about me? Yeah. So that's been a really big thing with us, working with our dealers to bring them up to what we say is the 21st century retailing. But I'll tell you, it's been crazy the last couple of years. You know, I mean, it's been tough. There was a big downturn in sales and everything. And a lot of our dealers, they just weren't prepared for it. You know, they've been just living on the edge for such a long time. It's been really hard. So we've gotten a lot of calls from dealers in the last couple of years of like saying, you know, they're getting old, you know, in their 60s, and they're saying, look, my kids don't want the business. I can't sell the business. Do you want the business? And we say, yeah, we'll take the business. And we've been taking over some businesses. We've been opening our own shops, and we've been doing concept stores of other shops. And I'll tell you, I mean, in a lot of cases, we always clean them up, make the shops nice, clean up the inventory and everything, clean up the toilet, you know? Ooh, take all the man cave stuff down.
Yeah, bike shop toilets.
And, you know, make it look nice, you know, and sometimes construction. the biggest return on investment is training of employees, how to treat a person, how to make a sale, how to do things, and it's like, I love working on bikes. I still work on bikes. The first people you hire a lot of the time is mechanics, but it seems like half of the mechanics have a mild case of Asperger's disease, and we put those people in the back room. We don't let them talk to humans.
Underground.
Yeah, exactly.
Put them underground.
They're a lot happier, and the customers are a lot happier. These guys, they're working on this, and the door opens, somebody comes in, and they're working on it saying, go away, go away, go away. Yes, can I help you? And they go away. So it's the state of, right now, it's like we're getting out to the front lines, and we're attacking the state of retail. You go to Yelp reviews, you go to, what is it? There's another one. I think it's Google does a something 360. You get immediate feedback from your customers, right? And you look at those feedbacks and you go, wow, the problem is clear. We insult our customers. So it's starting to turn around, that things are changing. That's the big change. Besides the fact, bikes are complex. The new product comes out, monthly, weekly. Standard piece of equipment on your bench top is the laptop, because that's the only way you can stay up with things. And you've got it, it's complex, but that works in our advantage. We're bound and determined to make this a professional business.
Mm-hmm. And I've just been trying to look at the name of a piece of proprietary technology. I can't remember it. But with the Trek mountain bikes now, what we're noticing is on the head tube, rather than going flat and down, it's just a straight head tube to make it stronger.
Right.
In order to achieve
you mean the down tube?
Yeah, the down tube. Sorry, yeah. And in order to achieve that, there's this new proprietary headset system.
The knock block.
The knock block, yeah.
Yeah.
So what we're noticing is there's more and more of these proprietary technologies coming in. Every brand has got their own technology, so you can't just fit a fork or a headset. Is going to be the right one for that bike.
But any fork will work on that bike.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, it's the headset. It's for that bike. It just keeps it, because it's the down tube comes straight up. We call it straight shot. Old school. I mean, it's more efficient that way. You can't have the fork crown ramming into it.
Yeah.
So it's. But I'll tell you, it's like and as an industry, we use this word standard, right? And it's sort of a joke. It's like the clipless pedal. What the hell does that mean to most customers?
Yeah.
Right? And standard, and I'm saying, we got to not, and say we got a new standard. No, we have optimized this. That's the truth, and really, in the old days, to come out with some brand new thing like that was risky. But, you take the 29er, oh, brother, that took us it was like 4 or 5 years until we actually started to sell a lot of them, and they started to go and make a profit. And we'd have dealers who would buy 2 bikes. They wouldn't even buy the inner tubes for them or the tires or anything. They'd have 2 bikes sitting over there, another 50 26-inch mountain bikes, and the clear message was, that's a freak show over there. Those are orphans, so what's going on? And then 27.5 came along, and everybody said, okay, let's do it. And all the tire makers made tires, the fork guys made forks, the rim guys made rims, we made wheels and everything, and boom, boom, boom. There it is. So it's very important that we support any new standard that we have, this optimization. But at the same time, I think it's better we tell the truth. It's not a standard. It's like, and the funny thing is, it's like, you look at Sutherland's bike manual. I don't know if you guys still use it, but there's 75 different rim bead sizes listed there, from 7-inch wheel to 36-inch wheel, right? And that's crazy. In the U.S., we use about 14 sizes, and it's still a lot. But I mean, you go buy an automobile, you go buy a motorcycle, and you don't buy by wheel size, tire size. You get them switched out and things. And when I say, you know, standard, I'll say to my guys, it's like, if we're going to make a new rim size or a new wheel size, I want it to fit as many of our current bikes as possible. Right? That's another way of looking at it. You know, way of doing it is that I don't want to have to buy a whole brand new bike to get into a different size tire.
And that's what we're seeing now with bikes that will take 29 out and 27 plus.
Yeah.
So you can swap them out.
27 plus is almost 29 in the outside diameter. You know, it's funny. It's a good size. And okay, let's go back 100 years. What were the two most common sizes? 28 and 32 inches. And you take our 29 plus, well, that's about 31 inches. Pretty close. You know, there was nothing that wide as we have today because we have, you know, superior materials than we ever had before. So we can make things super wide and they won't be ridiculously heavy. So it's pretty interesting. Any questions?
No. I'm just happy to listen to you.
I'm just rattling on.
Yeah, there's my. I took a photo of my Sutherland's manual.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Picture of it here.
Yeah.
I'm going to be. I was going to be selling it.
Oh, is it antique?
Yeah, it's a 20th anniversary one.
Yeah.
I'm saying, should I sell it? 6th edition. Should I sell it or not?
No.
Keep it.
Yeah, keep it. They're pretty heavy, you know. And it isn't. Nobody's digitized them, right? They're on. You can't find it online.
No. I've got Barnett's one as well.
Yeah. It's funny.
Yeah. There's a lot of things there you were saying that reminded me. I mean, you get out with the clunkers with the single brake.
Oh, brother.
Right. You know, I'm going out in the winter time on a single speed I threw together with second-hand bits, second-hand frame, just to set a V brakes on it. And it's, you know, you're out in sort of 4 or 5 inches of snow and you're uphill, you get uphill, then you come downhill and you've got no brakes. So this is where you got to learn to steer into corners and all this. And it's absolutely, you know, it's that was all about learning, you know, a long time ago, you know, and gears, how we're all onto single chain rings at the front.
Yeah.
I get fed up of having the small ring because this is, if the hill's too steep, I'm walking up it and then coming down. It was never really hitting the big gears. So as I was going, you know, it was all twisty tracks and that. So I said, I threw that off and I made my own chain guide and I was just riding a 6-speed bike, you know, and then you know, obviously I couldn't get more than a 28, so I went smaller sprockets at the front, made that, and you know, it's just a way ahead of the time. And like everyone says, why don't you invent that? You know, and oh God, and the fancy mudguards as well for bikes. I says, nah, you don't need that.
Right.
You know, the crump guards and that.
You know, keep it simple.
So it's just, there's just lots of things there you're talking about. Just good memories for me, you know. I mean, there's Sean's, you know, yourself saying there's a lot of dealers in their 60s. Yeah, I'm 63. I should have retired 3 years ago, but I'm still going, you know. But it's just I think we're just going to call it a day at some point, you know.
Yeah, retirement's tough, though. You know, it's
I've told my children just to get out, and they're working, doing their own thing, you know. And you know, I was brought up in it, you know. Family.
Third generation, Reg, in your bike shop?
Yeah, I'm third generation, but I said the kids go out. I mean, my son earns in a day what I earn in a week, you know. So it's you know, that's the way of living, you know.
Yeah.
So it's just through the love of the job I've done it.
Well, you better have a job you like, or else you'll be a slave your whole life.
Yeah, you know, you know.
It's like our President Trump is saying, oh, I just saved all these, the Saudis are going to buy our weapons and we're going to create all these jobs. Great, man. I'm making like weapons of mass destruction. Terrific, you know. I feel great about myself, you know. It's like, oh, baby. You know, we don't sell tobacco, you know. We don't sell weapons, you know. We sell things that make people happy.
Yeah,
Yep.
happy.
That makes me be able to go on, and that's the big thing. You know, Trek in the last couple of years has gotten better at their marketing. They find that, like last year, we had this big meeting, and we had a really good speaker, and he really drove home the point that like you're selling emotion, you know, and feelings rather than nuts and bolts. And so, like our slogan now is, you know, ride bikes, have fun, feel great.
Yeah.
That's what we do, you know. And I've been, you know, it's been a battle of mine for the longest time because, you know, the engineers and the product guys. I've been a product guy for a long time too, but they get stuck on the nuts and the bolts and the pieces, the little things, and just you watch the customers, their eyes glaze over, you know. And the best sales guy I ever had, you know, from like this was really early on. Just he would, and this was like we had a little tiny shop when we started, and we do wholesale and retail, you know. And he did the retail stuff, and he had a 50% close ratio. And basically, he'd tell people, "I'm new to this. I discovered it, and I've never been so happy. I'd love to share this with you. You've come to the right place."
Mhm.
That was it. It wasn't about, you know, this versus that, and then, you know, we got the people here. They're the total experts. Don't worry, man. You're in the right place. You know, we'll figure this all out. And that works really well. And people get, you know, you just watch people's eyes glaze over when you start talking tech. It's too much. You know, you have to be completely proficient in your technology. However, you can't just be blabbing at it, people. It just like goes, and they just go, you know. And then they say, "Oh, let me have a catalog. I'll go home and think about it." And you've lost the sale. They're gone.
Yeah.
I think that relates, Gary, to the e-bikes and the e-mountain bikes especially. Is in everyone rides them and goes, "That's so much fun."
Right.
You know,
That's it.
so, and you know, for myself, I've ridden all these amazing mountain bikes this year. I've been riding the new Lapierre bikes, carbon bikes, amazing. Rode the Nikolai Geometron and the Pole Machine, amazing. But now I'd be disappointed because I haven't got a motor. You know, for me, I'm being a bit controversial. For me, the e-bike is the natural evolution of the mountain bike because it just gets you out further. For me, it expanded my freedom range.
I know what you're saying.
And it took me to places I'd never been before that were only a few miles from home. But I'd never been because I've never gone, "Oh, what's up there? What's up there?" But with the e-bike, you can with no energy penalty.
Right. And the battery doesn't run out.
Yeah. And it, you know, so for myself, if I was going to take one bike from the Trek range, without question, road or mountain bikes, I am a roadie really, it'd be the Powerfly, no question.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you, Gary, if you could have one bike and it had to be one bike out of all of the range, what would you have?
Maybe an e-bike. You know, it's funny though. Where I live, it's good and controversial, and in the States, it's controversial. So I've resisted getting a Powerfly. I do have, you know, a commuter bike. It's about 5 years old, but you know, nice Bosch system, and I'll use that for shopping. Take the ferry to the city, and then go do my shopping. It's just so much faster. The e-mountain bikes, I've ridden them mostly in Europe, you know, and yeah, they're a lot of fun. They're like insane fun. You know, and it is the world's most efficient motorized transport, you know, hands down. The amount of energy that those things use is just tiny. It's something like, I think the charge of battery is something like 60 cents worth of power. You know, US dollar, 60 cents. You know, it's nothing. And it's amazing, you know. And they'll go all day, you know. It's amazing how long they go these days. And that just wasn't possible before. First e-bike I saw was in Japan about 30 years ago. And it was both Panasonic and Yamaha had them. And they were Mama-san bikes. And a Mama-san bike in Japan, it takes 2 kids and shopping. And it had about a 5-mile range, a lead acid battery. You know, what a limitation. And now, I mean, you know, you can go 40 miles on, you know, one of these new batteries, new setup and everything. They go a long ways. And then when it runs out, if it ever dies, it's not the end of the world. You can still pedal the thing. It's not that bad, you know, but they don't die, you know. They do the ride. Do the whole thing. You know, when you're saying, you know, I go on this power fly and I go out and do places I'd never seen before, I'm thinking, now that's confidence in your battery.
Yeah.
As it should be, because they're good. They go a long ways. So we've gone from the world's most efficient human-powered transport to the world's most efficient motorized transport. And it's like I've said to our company for a long time, it's like we're gonna, because for a long time I was worried, the automotive guys would get into it and take away our sales and everything, and recognize that this is really good. But you look at the bikes that the automobile industry makes. I mean, the people like Audi and Mercedes have made bikes and everything. And they're weird. They don't get it. You know what I'm saying? And right now, the bike industry, we make the world's most efficient machines by far. We know our stuff. We're really good at it. And so I've been encouraging our people, saying, look, those guys are never going to touch us as long as we keep focused and stay on it, and make a nice bike. Because we know pretty darn well about the act of riding a bike. The act of riding a bike has never been fully defined. It never will be fully defined because we keep finding new ways to ride them.
Fantastic. Okay.
I was out in Italy 2 years ago.
Yep.
Every single road bike that was going around Lake Garda in Italy was a standard, Colnago, Pinarello, something like that.
Yeah.
But 90% of the mountain bikes were e-bikes.
Yep.
90%. I couldn't believe it. Hardly saw a standard bike.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Mine was e-bike.
It's like it's half of our sales in Europe are e-bikes now. Half.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the power difference in Europe is different to that for the UK.
Yeah, a little bit. I thought here it's the same, isn't it? Like 15 kilometers, or
they've got the option,
or 20 kilometer.
Yeah, they've got the option to go 45k,
right.
But even then, they need motorcycle insurance and license and everything. So
right.
the 20,
you got a helmet too. You got
So the EU law is same as UK, or is in that 25k cutout,
Right.
And as we saw in the Bosch lesson, they're now wise to the tempering. So now when you plug your Bosch, you plug in your Powerfly with the Bosch motor, if you've been tuning it through wheel size, or if you've been messing around with where you're putting the receiver for the speedo, then we can tell.
Yeah.
So that it's getting very, very smart now in terms of the tech.
But it'll be fairly simple to switch over if the UK government lets it go the speed higher.
Yeah, I mean, personally, having ridden the e-mountain bikes a lot, I don't want more speed. I'm going through the woods uphill at 25k an hour, which is when I use the motor. I don't want to be going faster.
It's scary.
And down too much. Yeah, downhill. It was quite interesting. This summer, I went for a ride with one of our students who's in the Army mountain bike downhill team, and he's a real good rider, good racer. And I outrode him downhill on this e-bike because it's got the weight, but also it's got all the modern mountain bike geometry. It was long, it was slack at the head angle, it was low at the bottom bracket.
Oh, it's got big forks,
massive,
big tires,
massive, yeah.
And because you don't mind, because otherwise, if it's a non-powered bike, you go like, oh no, I'm not going to pedal that weight around.
Yeah, exactly.
So those are all the e-mountain bikes are a little more robust, a little more. They're made for going fast and everything. But I've got a speed pedalic at home, for my city bike, and that is that bike's an issue at 45 kilometers an hour and everything. Is it good for the mix? On the bike routes and everything. And when I ride it in the bike routes and everything, I don't go full blast. You can't. You got to be somewhat reasonable and everything.
Yeah.
But it's really funny right now. In the States, you've got these the electric scooter share, right? Bird is one of them, and they're evaluated at $2 billion, right? All this venture capital is going into these different companies, and these guys, I like them. You know why I like them? Because they're saying, why are there cars on every single street? And they've got the philosophy, we want to make safe places to use these vehicles, you know, and change the cities. And like, this is going to be more money in, you know, in lobbying, advocacy, and everything than the bike industry has ever seen previous. For instance, San Francisco Bicycle Coalition is 45 years old. 45 years old, and we haven't gotten bupkis. This sucks. The city sucks. The government sucks. The cops suck. We're going to change this. It takes money. It's coming.
Yeah, but you're heading up against Ford.
Oh, Ford is coming in on it. Are you kidding? They recognize the thing. The young people don't want to buy a car anymore. They say this is a
Ford one.
Yeah, well, they can't afford it for one thing. They'd sooner spend their money on rent, stay someplace cool, closer to town, and food, you know, and travel. They don't buy things. They rent things. They share things. It's just going in this direction quite a bit.
I mean, Gary and I are sat in King's Cross at the moment, and I used to live here on the canal, and we were members of Zipcar, and it means you can rent a car for £8 an hour. You can rent a van.
Why do you want to own the thing?
So
you got to find parking and everything. What a hassle!
You just go zap your smartphone on the windscreen, and you've got it. So I think for me, the e-bikes, this is going to change the world. It's obvious with urban, with all of the transport and freight, but I live in the country now. And I see all these people driving to work every day down the country lanes and riding the e-bikes. I thought, these guys probably can't cycle to work, you know, but because it's hilly and everything, they could e-bike to work.
You don't sweat nearly as much because, you know, you get going you're doing this, you're going up a hill, you're going at 5 miles an hour, you're in your suit, and man, you start to sweat. And you go up the hill, the same hill on an e-bike, and you're doing 12 miles an hour, you get cooled off, you know, and you don't put out as much effort. It works. It really works well for that commuting thing and everything. And then we got this other issue, healthcare. Health. I mean, the U.S. is crazy. And I mean, we are 18% of gross domestic product is spent on healthcare in the United States. And it's like, I'll point out to any of my Republican friends I know, I say, look, all these other countries, all the other first world countries are between 9 and 11% on healthcare. That's spread between 11% and 18% of U.S. domestic product. That's bigger than our Chinese debt service and our federal debt services combined. And I go, 1/3 of American 10-year-olds are pre-diabetic, and for the first time in American history, lifespan's going south. I call this a crisis. Change happens by crises, not by logic. Do you notice this? We're emotional beings.
Yeah. Yeah, so cool.
So, you know, there's like, hey, I'm raising the red flag of crises. Are you an American? I'm an American. Are you an American? I'm an American. I don't tolerate this, and I've got a plan. Do you have a plan? I want to hear it. I got a plan. Do you have a plan? I got a plan for our kids, for our families. They love hearing this. It's like the Republicans, they care about themselves, their families, and their money, right? It's not green, not environment. Right now, this is not popular words at this moment, unfortunately. Stupidly, right? But anyway, you know, it's we're doing a program in the States. We're putting $1 million a year into NICA, national. It's a high school mountain biking basically, and it's almost doubling every year. You know, it's amazing. The kids love it. And where I live, Marin County, it's like every high school has a team, and most of the teams are bigger than a football team. And most of the teams are around 40% girls. This is a big secret, you know, in the health of our kids. We're seeing our kids, and this is a screen-free activity. And this is an activity you can do with your parents. A teenager can do with their parents. And man, how many things can you do with your teenager, right? So this is going, and we get the kid and we get their parents behind the whole thing, and it has started to change things. We got a plan. You know, we don't sit back and go, oh, boo-hoo, the market's horrible. I don't like that. You know, I mean, like, I want to create change in this world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I would say that's the perfect place for a wrap, because we tend to go for about an hour. And that's exactly what Cycle Systems is all about. It's what you guys are all about. So, Gary, thank you for your time.
Always.
This
Thanks for
afternoon.
having me. And hey,
It's
you
a real
guys.
pleasure.
I mean, I love working on my bike. I will never.
Oh, me too. We all do.
It's called metal therapy, right?
Okay. But I reckon, as we just got Reg and Bianca with us live, a lot of you are riding or working today. So if you're watching this on Facebook, get your questions down below and we'll send them over to Gary. And I'm sure when you've got a chance, Gary, you'll get answering them. So I'm
We'll
going
catch him again.
Yeah, going to wrap this. And I would love for 2019 membership, Gary, to have Trek involved somehow in terms of training, education, you know, all those side of things we've talked about. If we can do something together for that, for our mechanics across the world, that'd be awesome.
In this coming February, I'm coming to London to speak at an urban mobility, I'm a keynote speaker at an urban mobility conference, you know, and all these other guys will be there. I mean, Uber will be there, you know, the flying car guys will be there, you know, it's a big fight right now for who's going to take over urban transport. And I'm telling them, health, bikes, none of this stupidity, all this crazy stuff, you know.
Yeah.
You can keep it sort of simple. It's amazing.
Well, I said we were going to wrap, but my son's actually here, so he said he's got a question for Gary.
Right.
So I'm going to let him sit down.
Here we go. The hardest question of the day usually comes from the kid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you got for me?
So how did Trek get its name Trek?
All right, I know the answer to that one.
Okay.
It was at a bar. They thought of it. They were drinking at a bar. They thought of the name. There you go. That was it. It's pretty.
So they got drunk and just.
It's sort of like a Midwest thing. They believe in adult beverages. You gotta watch out. Alcohol is always. You know, but it's funny. I mean, Trek is it's been a great name, but we get confused with Star Trek a little bit.
Also, may as well just add in there, Oak has got a mountain bike club in at his school. They've just started this term.
Yes.
So, Gary, what can you say? How can they get their mountain bike club really rocking?
It's just.
Get Trek bike.
Oh yeah. You know, it's. I mean, you know, yeah. It's gonna happen. You just kids go out and do it, and just keep hassling your parents. It'll happen. You watch. Go ride with your parents. Go have fun with it. It's amazing. I mean, that thing it just goes on its own. Because I mean, and the big thing with the organization in the States, they don't call them bike riders. They call them student athletes, and they have a big emphasis on you've got to keep your academics together. And they also, you know, the racing aspect of it, it's a team sport more, so everybody contributes, you know, in the points they get, you know, to be a team thing. And so everybody rides, nobody's left on the bench, and it's all inclusive. I mean, it's really the way it works. But you could go and look for NICA in the States and look at their rules and the way they do things, because it's a really good program. It's been around for 15 years now, and well, it started out as a NorCal mountain bike league, and about 5 years ago they started to go nationwide, and it is almost doubling every year.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
You can do it too.
Oh, nice one. So let's call that a wrap. Thank you, Raj. So yeah, so we're going to call it a wrap there, guys. So thanks for joining us on your Sunday.
Thank you.
You guys watching this after, you know, after it happened live. Should have been here live, but we'll see you next time. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Bye.
Okay.